Tonight is about a lot of things. It's about a last meal Jesus shares with his disciples, from which we draw the Eucharist. It's about the humble act of washing feet, and perhaps the even more humble act of having your feet washed. It's about the final command of Jesus to love one another. But what this night also is uncomfortable. The prospect of washing feet is so uncomfortable that a lot of people skip tonight altogether. But I do think that the discomfort has a pedagogical sort of function in it. The fact is that following God is often an uncomfortable experience. We're always growing, hopefully, in the spiritual life. And that means we're not stagnant. Things about us are changing. We're always being invited to trust God more and to learn to love ourselves and grow into who God intended us to be and to love our neighbors. And often the journey of growth in those areas is through an uncomfortable kind of terrain. Trusting God is not the most easy thing to do. In a culture that prizes pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps and making your own way, the thought of entrusting your life and future to God is often foreign, hard to make sense of. In a world full of disasters, collapsing bridges, and human-made famines and bombs, sometimes it feels very naive to trust that God is with us and that God fully loves us. And sometimes our own experiences of what feels like unanswered prayer or difficult church institutional experiences or difficult things that happen to us make trusting God extremely fraught. But it's by trusting God that we find the kind of freedom and invitation to fuller life. The Greek word in the New Testament that we often translate as faith is actually trust. Because faith in God isn't about having a bunch of knowledge in your head and reading all the theological things. It's about your heart. It's about trusting the Holy One. And I think there's no mistake that throughout Scripture, the Hebrew canon and the New Testament, God, through the prophets or through angelic messengers or even God himself, keeps saying, do not be afraid, do not be afraid, do not be afraid, because trusting God is kind of a fearful thing. How do you entrust more of who you are to God in ways that aren't pious or trite or trivial or lip service, but are truly believing in the God who loves us, who's engraved our names on the palms of that God's hands, who holds us in all aspects of our lives? It can be an uncomfortable thing to grow in our trust of God. But likewise, it can be an uncomfortable thing to grow into who we're called to be. The spiritual journey is not necessarily easy either. Often it asks of us to let go of a lot of things we think are essential to us. All the mental habits of mind, all the lenses we so easily put on, all the emotional ways we have of working in the world. The Spirit of God invites us to take a good look at ourselves and admit that some of those things do not serve us. But the truth is, we're pretty comfortable. Sure, anger might not be the best way of handling our problems, but we've done it forever. It's easy. Sure, stirring up other people to make sure they're on our side and not on someone else's side has been our way of operating for years. To let it go would be to not know what to do. The critical voice that beats us up all the time, well, how would you even begin to stop it? How would you begin to stop trying to make everything in the world perfect or get your way? To admit those things about ourselves is uncomfortable. To believe that the Spirit of God to remake those pieces of ourselves, that it's possible, that's uncomfortable too. But that's actually what spiritual growth is about. But it begins with the discomfort of owning the things that we don't often like to see, that we'd rather keep in the shadows. But grace comes to us invites us to it, to walk through the discomfort, to grow into who God calls us to really be. But I think it's also deeply uncomfortable to carry out the mission of God in the world around us. It is strikingly unpopular to extend love or even a best intention to someone our cultural niche dislikes or distrusts. To do that is to make everybody across whatever line upset. It's not always comfortable to stand for the just or the right thing when it's not easy or not obviously straightforward. To care about others who are not doing as well as we are in the world, to care about the refugee and the immigrant, to care about people of color, to care about the way our communities marginalize folks who are queer, to care about housing crises, to care about the environment asks something of us that's uncomfortable. It presses into our time, it presses into our wallets, it presses into our energy, but it might be the mission of God in the world. Because it's ours as Christ followers to carry the love of God into the world, and to do so by offering love and tangible things to people who are without, and by calling into question every powerful structure that does not serve everyone. And to do either one of those things is difficult and often uncomfortable. And so I think the discomfort of having one's foot washed and of washing another person's foot teaches us something about the discomfort of following God. That we're always being asked to either step down and serve in a new way, or being asked to accept the grace of God or the service of God from another person that is humbling and also uncomfortable. And so, this evening, as we engage this strange event, may we be mindful of what it teaches us, about where the discomfort lands for us, and what that might have to say to us about who God is calling us to be, about how we learn anew to walk through the discomfort of trusting God and growing into our own goodness and loving others. Because really, the discomfort might be painful, but the invitation is to walk more closely with the God who died for us, for love of us, and to grow in love of God and of neighbor and of self. Isn't that what life is about?